Well, here we are after Christmas. As you can see, the belly is protruding a little bit further into the frame. Far too much to eat over the festive period. Anyway, I digress before I've even started. So here is where we're at. We've got the fuselage skin mainly on. We've obviously got some other bits to do. And this is where we are going to take it. So we've got the tail feathers on. We've got the turtle deck on there, and also underneath we've got the little wooden block of the tail skid also installed. So I'll put that to one side at the moment, and we'll crack on with this. Now the first part that we'll do is that tail skid there, and you'll see that part is on the fuselage sheet. It's a 1mm Depron part, and you'll also see Depron like part. It's not actually Depron because that's a trade name, but similar to. And you'll see on the score sheet Z12, which is the that part there, there's quite a complex scoring and beveling procedure that we need to do to it. Such a small part, such a lot of work to do. If you've made the Newport 17 before, you'll know about this, because you'll have had to have done it for the 17. So, essentially, we're creating a boot to go around the base of the tail skid. So right there. So where this little bit protrudes out, if I show you the finished product, you'll see there it looks like a block of wood now, but obviously a lot lighter. So let's release the part from its sheet, and then the first process really is to get the sanding stick and put the bevel in. Off the side of the table there. Right, pop that to one side and smooth the side, don't want the rough side. And then, as it shows on the score sheet here, there's a sort of a fairly light bevel around there, probably maybe even 30 degrees rather than 45 degrees. And then at the trailing edge, or what will be the trailing edge of it, there's a wider bevel, so maybe a 60 degree or something like that. So you don't have to be particularly accurate, but as you can see, I'm using my fingers to support the material and then just carefully sanding away to create that fairly upright bevel of about 30 degrees. So that goes all around the edge, like so. And then on the back edge, as I said, a more shallow bevel, and in fact there's another way that you can actually bevel with these small parts, is to actually take the part and move it back and forth on the sanding stick, which gives a little more control on the angle. So I'm holding it nice and shallow on the stick there, and I can keep that constant. And I can always turn it over and just see how it's going. So There we go, that'll do. That's close enough. I don't know whether you can actually see the beveling going on there. Let's see if we can bring the focus to bear. So now we're just going to attach that to our score sheet. I'll use a little bit of Tamiya tape. Other tapes are available. So I'm going to attach it and avoid putting the tape over the lines, the bevel lines. Go. Then very carefully, using my 1 meter rule. I don't think you need a 1 meter rule to do this. I think you could probably get away with something a lot smaller. So I'm just going to go around, following each one in turn, using the right side of the knife, and that is the back side of the knife, just to pop a crease . Nice and firm and shallow with that pressure. Go. So now I can actually remove that from the sheet, and then we can proceed to shape it to make it easier to install. So what we want to do is bend it obviously on the center like so. It's a fairly sort of sharp leading edge to it, and then these curve round either side. So what we'll try and do is make sure that each one of those scores has essentially folded so that they can give us that sort of teardrop shape that we're after, like so. So installing it is simply a matter of popping it under the tail skid that protrudes to the front of the sort of the stem of it, and then that should, with a little bit of fiddling, fit and sit around it nicely, and the two ends of the part meet up at the back there. So there are a number of places we need to add glue, and that is obviously along these edges here where they will come together, and then where the part sits on the back, the underside of the fuselage, just there and there. So I'm going to put some onto the rear side first. I'm going to put on both sides, and then we'll let that dry off so it forms our contact adhesive. And then I'll also, using a pair of tweezers so I don't get glue all over my fingers, add a bead to the edge that's going to come into contact with the underside of the fuselage. Good, right. So I'm just going to let that dry off for now. Pop that to one side, over there. And whilst that's drying off, let's just move that out of frame. We can think about putting the tail feathers together. So let's grab our wing sheet. And firstly, what we'll do is we'll put the horizontal stabilizer and the elevator together. So let's just release those. I'll turn this over again so I can see more clearly. Oh. It's double-sided, of course, so it doesn't really matter whether I've got it up one way or the other. Go. Good. So here are elevator and horizontal stabilizer, and what we need to do on this leading edge of the elevator is, as we do with pretty much all of our aircraft, we put a bit of carbon fibre to strengthen it and stop it twisting at the very narrow bit in the centre. So that carbon fibre part should be in your parts bag. It comes with the kit, and it should be already pre-cut for you. Not all of the carbon fibre is, but this part is. So that should be in the small bag. And there are two pieces. One of them has a round profile, which actually forms the axle, and the other one is a strip, which is about 0.4 mil by 1 mil, like so. And that's the part that you need, not the round bit. And that should be long enough to sit on the leading edge of the elevator. And what you want is that you want the 1 mil, because this is a 1 mil piece of material, you want the 1 mil to be sitting flat against that edge, so that you've literally only got 0.4 of a mil poking out the front. So to do that, we need to run a little bead of glue along that edge, and this is where the old super nos comes in handy, because it really keeps the glue to a minimum. And then we just drop this in place. Now I'm probably going to get a little bit of glue on my fingers doing this. There we go. So I'll just clean my fingers off before I touch anything else. Fantastic. Good. And there's no, I'm just looking for twist. So there's no twist in that either. So I'll just leave that over there to dry. Whilst we're waiting for that to dry, a couple of things. Firstly, ball tool. To get rid of the white edges on these parts that get exposed when they are laser cut, you can just run the ball tool around the edge and that will bring the printed parts closer together. Obviously it's compressing the foam at that edge. Now, we won't do it down there because obviously that's where the leading edge of the elevator is. Let's just make sure those tabs are flattened off as well where I've cut the part out. So I'm going to go around the rear side of it as well, so I'm pressing from the top and the bottom. There we go. And as you can see, it hasn't completely got rid of that white edge, but it's seriously reduced it. If you want, you can use the smaller ball tool, and that will increase the pressure right on the edge. It'll bring that even closer together. There we go. So that looks good. What we're going to do with this is run that ball tool round the edge again, just to flatten the trailing edge too. Whether this actually has any effect on the aerodynamics of the parts, I've no idea. But obviously on the real aircraft, they tend to taper towards the rear of the flying surfaces. So maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So there we go. Okay, well, now we've done that, we'll just pop that to one side and we'll complete our little shroud for the tail. So just going to slide it under again as I did before, bring that up there, and then the secret here is to obviously get the rear part here to match up when it comes together, so you don't have too much in the way of exposed white foam to deal with. So using any tools to hand, you can make sure that all of this comes together. There we go. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of tape just on this rear edge here, just to hold that down while the glue dries. And there we go. We have that in place. Right. So I'll just once again pop that to one side and we can bring our horizontal stabilizer and elevator back on screen. So you'll also know that there's a score running down this horizontal stabilizer, which is a first for any of our kits, and that allows us to put a little bend in the tail, which once again is a little bit unusual. But as I previously explained, the aircraft itself, the full scale Aviatik Berg D.1, actually had this camber in its tail, so we've put it in as well. It's not particularly angular, but it's a nice little bit of detail that's added to this kit that makes it quite unique. So we've just put that little bend in. Obviously that bend will be set when it goes into the slot that we've made available for it on the tail there, but just bend it for now, and that should settle once we've got it installed. Right, let's attach the elevator to the horizontal stabilizer, and to do that we need some stickers. So let's grab our sticker pack, sticker sheet, and so we're looking at S3, 4, 5 and 6 to occupy, and they actually sit as from top to bottom or from left to right. So S3 goes on the far port side. There should be some little white markers that show you where they go, and they're not particularly stand out on this very light canvas type colour, but you should be able to see them to give you an indication of where they sit. And obviously where the line is on the sticker is where the hinge line is for the structure itself. So there we go. And then when we bring the elevator to bear, we need to make sure that there is about a ½ mil gap between that leading edge carbon fibre and the horizontal stabilizer itself, and that will allow the whole elevator to flex back and forth. So and obviously when you attach it you want the sides to match up. Okay, there we go. So now we have our tail. Oh, there seems to be something stuck under there, some sort of lump. So let's just see if we can peel back that sticker, find out what it is. Some bit of debris or something. Yeah. Go. So, fabulous. Right. To install this, let's just take that off. That should have done its job now. This sits in the slot that's created here. Obviously, we've got these little folding tabs at the side here that are going to fold down onto the top of this, but we'll leave them as is for now. And you can dry fit this, and you can see exactly where it goes, like so. And you can also check on whether it's sitting perpendicular to the upright of the fuselage. If it's not, just check where the body sides are at in relation to each other, because you might have one sitting a little bit high, one a little bit too low, and you might find that the central foam keel might be a little bit too high as well. So get your knife in there and just shave out any excess material, just to make sure it'll all sit nicely. And then, as you can see there, I've got a nice sort of flat slot for it to go in. And I'm also noticing that my the deck here that comes to the back is a little bit too long, like a millimetre. So I'm just going to take off a little bit at the back there. There we go. And hopefully that then won't hinder the movement of the elevator up and down. So that's where it sits. So what we can do now is just add some glue. I'm just going to put it on the rear side where the keel, it sits on the keel itself. Let's clear the nozzle. It seems to be a little bit clogged. So where it sits on the keel at the back there, and then a line from the cutout there all the way back to the central point at the back of the horizontal stabilizer. Oh, and also I'm going to put a little bit on the edge, inside edge, where this sits on the side of the fuselage, like so. Slide that in, then make sure it's sitting where it's supposed to, and also checking that this is sitting centrally, and using that V there as a guide. So I'm just going to let the glue do its thing, as in dry, and then I'm going to get a little bit of glue onto the edges. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out for now. I should have done this before, and then because so I can get to it here, just put some glue on the edges of these little side tabs that are part of the upper deck, like so. I'm going to pop this back in. Go. And then I'm just going to use the side of my knife. I'm using it upside down, so I'm not going to stick it through the horizontal stabilizer. I'm just going to, and there's that little bit again. Just going to fold it. I'm not expecting it to stick, but just to get some of that glue that we've positioned on those tabs onto the top of the horizontal stabilizer. So I'll just do that on the other side too. Good. Right. So once again, I'm just checking, making sure everything's square as it should be. And now hopefully that glue will be dry enough that when I fold this side in, the tab should stay down. Go. Just do the other side. Perfect. Awesome. Good. So we've now got our horizontal stabilizer, elevator, and our little tail skid block in place. If you want to, as you can see, I've got a little bit of a white line there, so I can actually use my little ball tool just to compress against the thumb, like so. Just start reducing that. Good. So it looks like the glue is being a little bit ineffective on the edge there. So what I'm actually going to do is using a bit of paper. This is actually probably a post-it note or something like that. Just put a little bit of glue on the edge there and just use that to run some into the gap like so. And then I can once again fold that in to deposit that glue onto the upper surface as well of the stabilizer, and then we'll repeat the process and hopefully it'll hold. Certainly got a good hold on that side. So right, I'm going to have a cup of tea. There we go. So I've now pushed that back under with the extra glue that we put on, and that's holding nicely. The other thing we ought to do while we're here, this slot here is for taking the vertical stabilizer. I'm just going to make sure, because we've been compressing it a bit, that it's open enough to receive that 1mm foam. So there we go. Right. Whilst we're here, we might as well put the control horn onto the elevator, and you'll see that there is a hole here that we've actually covered up with a sticker there. So what I'm going to do is just pop the knife through, so that goes through and shows us where our control horn is going to go, and then I'm just going to put the knife in and just wiggle it a bit just to open up that slot. So let's get our plastic parts, and we are going to need P10 and P11. Not quite in sequence, but so one little trick here, well, it's not a trick, it's just a recommendation, is due to the way that these are cut out, you might get a little bit of burring on the smaller cuts in the holes. So what I suggest is you just give it a quick scrub with the sanding stick, just to make sure those burrs are taken off. And then obviously you've got a score down the centre of the control horn, and you fold it over and everything should come together like so. Now if you find that control horn is that the fold is a bit stiff, and what you can do is just plonk it down and run your knife gently through that score. And that should make it fold a lot easier. It just means the glue has less work to do. So there we go. Glue on. I put glue on both sides. We'll let that dry to some extent, and then bring it together, and hopefully it'll stay. Right. Let's just fold that together, like so, and then that should go into the little plate with the slot in, otherwise known as P10. Like so. Then you should be able to turn it over, pop some glue on the entire base, which will also obviously cover the part that is poking through the control horn. And then that can be placed through the slot and onto the elevator, and the glue combined with the plate and obviously the slot provides a nice stable platform for the control of the elevator. But obviously you need to let the glue dry before it becomes effective. There we go. So onto the rudder and vertical stabilizer. So we are looking at Z6 and Z7. I believe that's Z7. This hasn't been numbered. Yours will have been. Let's just make sure. Yes, Z7, Z6 and Z7. So there's some more updating for me to do for this aircraft before it's released. So let's just pop these out anyway. So on Z6 there are a couple of things of note. Firstly, obviously you've got this tab here. This tab actually goes through that slot in the rear of the deck. Excuse me. Sorry. Oh, sorry about that. Rudely interrupted by the postman. Or not so rudely interrupted. He was very polite. Percy, who was a bit rude. But there we go. Didn't bite him. So he'll live another day. Percy, that is. Anyway, as I was saying, on the vertical stabilizer, number of things. Firstly, take my glasses off so I can see. There's a little cutout slot here. Oh no, what was I say? You got the tab here that goes through the slot in the fuselage, you've got a little cutout here, which is for the struts that that sit on the on between the vertical and the horizontal. So there's a little slot there, and there's also a little tiny hole. I don't know whether I can just about see it, just there. Just there, that's been punched out, and that's for a bit of rigging that goes through there as well. Actually, if I bring on the Secret Santa, you can see how the strut sits and that rigging at the front there as well. So that's that, and then our Z7. Cut that out, and this obviously it's the little slot just there for the control horn, and then you've got this cutout here which just allows for the elevator to move up and down, because obviously they're sat over each other. So before we do anything else, let's knock our edges down. So on the vertical stabilizer, it's just the front edge there, the curve, and obviously we'll do that on both sides. What I tend to do is use the big one to knock it initially, and then use the small one just to add a little more pressure, maybe a little more curve right at the edge, like so. There we go. And we'll do the same to the back edge of the rudder. Go. So what I'm going to do is actually attach. Sometimes on some of our models we assemble that beforehand. This time I'm actually going to pop that in place, the vertical stabilizer in place, before I put the rudder on. So the other thing, of course, I'm going to knock down the tab so that we've got a small leading edge to it, so it should go into that slot quite neatly. So let's just, it's a good tight fit as well, so that's nice. Excellent. So that's where we want it to go. So let's just pop some glue. Now with this foam to foam, if you constantly fiddle with the part while it's drying, the glue doesn't tend to add too much in the way of strength. But if you bring the parts together and then leave them to dry, it's a pretty solid glue. So I'm just going to press that into place and then just leave it. Of course, I'm going to check that it's got good symmetry with the horizontal, and it's quite easy at the moment just to follow the keel, the upper keel up the aircraft, and just make sure that that is sitting parallel or in the same plane. Good. So I'm going to just let that dry before we put our rudder on. Whilst that is drying though, what we can do is put our control horn in place, and that's actually going to sit on the opposite side to the control horn on the elevator, so it'll be on the starboard side, on this side here. So let's grab our pieces. We're looking at P8 and P9. So the P8 plate is a little more sophisticated because obviously you haven't got much real estate down the bottom of the rudder there. There we go. I'll just give that a little extra score. Would have been easier to leave that in there while I did this, but it's out now. Obviously we're going to pop it over and give it a quick sand down. Good, okay. Right, just let the glue dry on that. Just check. Okay, let's fold that together. Oh no, the glue's not set yet. Let's just leave that for a little while. I'll just pause. Glue dried. Let's go. Sometimes you'll find the glue that you put on the inside of here will encroach on the holes, and rather than wait to try and frustratingly get your control rods through there, what you can do is just make sure that they're opened up by popping a little bit of wire through there just to get rid of that excess glue. It's much easier to do it now than it would be when it's on the aircraft. So this is actually going to sit, as I said, on the starboard side. It's going to sit in the slot here. And if we do it now, then what it means is that when we come to put this on, of course we've got a little hinge here. This sits on the other side. If we actually added this after we'd put this on the aircraft, what you find is that the part finds it difficult to go through the slot with that other bit of plastic the other side. But if we do it here, we can make a really good job of it. And also it is still pretty flush with the other side, so hopefully that hinge will have no problem adhering to the other side of this rudder. So that was just a dry fit. Now on to the real thing. A good covering of glue. Grab the tweezers. pop it in place. There we go. Just make sure that it's perpendicular to the rudder itself, and then once again we'll just let that dry off a little, give it a chance to get a really good bond onto the rudder so it does what it should do. So while that is drying off, let's just turn our attention to getting the sticker hinge on. So we've got quite a big sticker hinge here, and it's only because of the graphic. It means that we don't have to work too hard to get it lined up, because the graphic is all on the sticker. But there is a little, you'll notice there's a little hole there that should come out that obviously goes over the slot there, and we should be able to match the graphics up as well. Right, excuse me, itchy nose. Excuse the silence, I'm just concentrating a bit. There we go. Just there we go. I'll need to make a little adjustment to the graphic there, as it's a little bit out of line with the striping. But there we go. So now what we can do is, it's just with our lower hinge, we'll pop on a little bit of glue onto the blank side of that. And then we can pop our rudder in place. Once again, concentration of silence. I think we can go a little bit further. Once again, I'm trying to ensure we have an equal gap between the two parts. Oh. I'm being fussy. There we go. That's it. And then just make sure that that hinge at the bottom adheres to the other side too. So there we go. So just a little work I have to do on the graphic at the back there, but everything else seems to be sitting in place nicely, and we've got our we've got both our control horns in place too. So that's a bonus. Good. Right, well that concludes the tail for the aircraft. Now let's go and pop on the turtle deck, which is the final stage of this particular operation. Okay, right, onto that deck, turtle deck, Z5. There we go. Let's tackle this from the other side. There we go. So this requires some scoring and beveling as well. You can see here Z5, and the beveling itself, you can see it's sort of graduated from being fairly small here and probably around about 20 degrees, and tapering out to around about 70-80 degrees at the back here. So this is a little bit of artistic license. I mean, you don't have to get the protractor out, but obviously when sanding, I'll start off at the top there and just provide that fairly narrow bevel, and then as you move down, just shallow out the angle of the sanding stick to get that longer bevel, or deeper, wider bevel. So as you sand right to the back here and give that deep bevel, you are certainly weakening the material at the back, which is not a bad thing because obviously it has to go through quite a severe curve. But when it comes to scoring that material, we've just got to be a little bit careful, because when I was previously building the other aircraft, I put a little bit too much pressure, or didn't release the pressure as I got to the back end, and it actually took a chunk of the back end off. It doesn't look too bad, but obviously prefer if we could not remove parts of the aeroplane that aren't supposed to be removed as we go. So when I come to score this, I'll show you what I mean and give you a bit of advice as to how best to achieve the score, because obviously you've got a concentration of scoring down that end as well. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a flare out here at the end. Try not to sand that off, because the way that the fuselage changes as it gets towards the cockpit requires that flare. Makes it easier for us to bring the parts together. A better fit, I should say, if that flare is still in place. Okay, so we'll pop our part onto the score sheet. Obviously, the more accurate you can make this, the better your chance of the scores being in the right place. Once again, keep the the sticky stuff out the way of the actual score lines, if you can. I think that's going to interfere, isn't it? A little bit further up. I think that might as well. There we go. Right, so as I was saying, when you're scoring, as you move down, as you get to the bottom here where that material is much thinner, just sort of ease off the pressure. Not so much that you're not scoring anymore, but slowing it down is also a good way of controlling it so that you don't damage the part in the process. And when I chipped the bit off, I was probably enthusiastically raking down here and being a little laissez-faire about the whole process. Go. So if we just get this off the score sheet in one piece. And then what we'll do is make sure that all of those scores, oh, before we do that, and maybe I should have done this before scoring, but if we just knock down the edge of the cockpit area like so, then we'll reduce that white line. So it's just, but now we just need to shape the part along our score lines. Make sure that each one of those scores actually bends through. And that'll give us a nice curve. If we don't one score there that's a little bit weak, it's not giving up, so let's just go over it. There we go. And spend some time doing this just to make sure that that curve is going to be curved as much as possible. There we go. So you can end up sort of just rolling the thing just to make sure that each one of those scores has an even bend to it. Okay, now this is where our dry fitting comes in handy. Let's get rid of the ruler. And so how you want to place this is that the leading edge of the combing on the front there should hit exactly the point where that former with the graphic on the back of the cockpit sits, so that literally sitting, you should be able to match the graphics up as well, but should sit like so. You can see that it's pretty much bang on that join there. You'll also know that obviously there's this little sort of sweeping part to the combing itself. Now that's quite hard to achieve on this this particular material, so it may be that it will look a little flatter than it is in real life, but we can, once we've got this on, use our ball tool just to press the material down a little bit more so that we can start accentuating that concave curve in the fuselage. So the easiest way that we can apply this, you'll notice that it's a pretty tight fit. You're going to be sort of making sure, you'll see that, I mean, it fits pretty much perfectly, but it's constantly sort of fighting against the upward pressure of the formers, etc. So I'm actually going to just shave off a little bit there just to make sure that it's the angle that the two parts meet is there, and the former's not trying to push the material too far up over the front edge of the material. So once you're happy with where it sits, then what we need to do is obviously attach it. And like many of our other aircraft that have a similar sort of turtle deck, we are going to do it in stages. And that first stage is to get a little bit of glue on one side where we know that the part is going to come in contact. So up the edge of the formers like so, and down the top keel, and also a little bit along the side of the fuselage as well. We're going to use that as a contact adhesive, so don't worry if you go a little bit too far, because it'll dry out and hopefully you won't be. Oh, I've done the other side as well, just out of habit. Don't need to do that yet. And the other area that we can put the glue is along the edge that we're going to be popping down there. So just run a bead all the way down like so. Right, and I'm just going to put that in place just so that I know where that glue is going. Okay, and then I think I probably actually transferred enough glue on there that I don't actually have to run any more through. But if you find that you haven't transferred enough, you can just run a bead along the area that it marks out when that's pressed home. When you're doing that, make sure that this tip here sits centrally at the back there. You don't want it skewed off to one side. But we'll now let that dry off and then bring it together once the contact adhesive properties are in place. Okay, let's make our first move. So this is important that we get this placed correctly. So I'm just making sure that that's covering the top of the former there, and making sure that that's sitting in the middle, and then making sure that that comes down onto the side wall just there. And I might just pop there we go, just to secure it in place while the glue finally cures. And I'm just going to use a little bit of pressure to make sure that edge is sitting down. And then what I need to do is just get some glue on the other side here, so I can fold it over and bring it all together on the other side. So once again, glue on the formers. Like so. And then a bead on the edge. Like so. Just bring that down and just make sure I transfer some of that glue over, which will make the grab effect so much more effective once the glue dries. So once again, wait for the glue to dry and finish it off. Okay, let's bring it together. So what's important is that we get enough pressure to ensure that the material reaches right over. So I've got it going a little bit concave down this end here, so I'm just going to get the knife under there, that's it. Just release it a bit and then reapply pressure so that we've got a nice even application of the part. And then probably going to add another bit of tape this side while we get a full cure of the glue. Just now the other thing you can do that I did with the first one that I made, just to make sure that we get good adhesion down on the sides here, is just to put some glue on the inside of the join as well. Now you can either use the foam to foam, which I'm doing here. I'm just getting some of that on the inside, or you could equally use Aviatik or the foam safe CA glue as well. So all will do the job. I think probably the CA and the Aviatik would provide a nice, quite a strong join, whereas the foam to foam is not as rigid as CA. But there we go. So I'll leave the tape on there. I'll probably leave it on overnight. But that really, I think, gets us to the stage we were at with the first one. So there's obviously some more work to do on the tail, but I think that's probably left till one of the last processes that we do in building this aircraft, as it can sort of get in the way while we're handling the aircraft, and we don't want to be sort of pushing and pulling the rigging and the struts when they're in place. So we'll leave that till a later date. But that. Just a little bit of pressure down there just to make sure that sits down. But yeah, so there we go. We've got our tail in place, and we've also attached the upper rear deck, the turtle deck. Fantastic. Great.